Welcome back, MTG Joe here. The Pro Tour deck lists for Standard are officially here. We have the decks the pro players brought for Standard Best of 3. A portion of this Pro Tour is also Draft, but the constructed component is Standard. And this is the first very large tournament since the release of Marching Machines. And we get to see what the field's like. So we're going to start with that. I'll highlight kind of examples of each deck. There's a large component of others. We can look at the breakdown here. I'll link where you can find all the deck lists if you're looking for something specific. But this is really to kind of intend to talk about high level, give you a demo, and kind of go from there. So if we look at the proportion of the field, red, black in like Rakdos style splash in other colors. Black cards are the most prevalent. Rakdos Midrange makes up almost 19% of the field. Grixis Midrange, which is basically splashing for Corpse Appraiser. You have Esper Legends, which plays slightly different, but does still have some black cards. Shield is still really representative. Rakdos Reanimator, which is like the Rakdos deck that splashes for Atraxa to reanimate it. You have Grixis Reanimator, which is a similar vein, trying to cheat out Atraxa typically, or Atali. We got a couple of domain decks. Whether it be Domain Control or 5-color Ramp, which we'll take a look at. Mono White's pretty static, 3.6%. We got a Jeskai Control deck, which is kind of new. We also have Rakdos Breach, which is kind of a Rakdos Midrange deck that's using Big Score to get out Breach the Multiverse. And then we got a whole lot of others that come in. So we're going to take a look at the stuff in terms of the format. Like I said, Rakdos being the most prevalent. If we go down the list, we can see examples of like Mono Red, 6 players brought it, 2.4%. Grixis Singularity combo, which is with Hidetsugu and Kari. We got some control decks, some soldier decks, some enchantment decks, and then a whole bunch of one-ofs. Orzhov Toxic, Abzan Legends, Rakdos Aggro, various Phyrexian or mid-range piles, Dimir decks. We got a Dimir Toxic, the Ratablade combo, Boros Midrange. So whole bunch of one-of decks. Something like I saw 65% of the decks are registering Fable the Mirror Breaker. So very interested to see what happens to this card after this weekend, if it does see a ban or not. Let me know in the comments if you think the Fable's time in Standard is gone or should kind of pass over. I'm thinking, in my opinion, Fable, Shieldred probably get banned. It would open up a lot of other kind of strategies. So it kind of goes over here, just a brief breakdown, but what was interesting here is the March of the Machine cards that are seeing the most play. Lithomantic Barrage in the sideboard is seeing a lot of play. The 1-mana hate on blue and white creatures. Chandra's Hope Beacon, just very, very powerful planeswalker, seeing a split between. And kind of a card I underestimated, Atali Primal Conqueror. I thought it was just a big dumb EDH dinosaur, but it's seeing a lot of play. Some sideboard hate cards, Surge of Salvation, Glistening Deluge, and then just kind of going down the list of cards seeing play. So we'll jump into it. So an example of the Rakdos Midrange deck, I'll paste these deck lists as well, so you can just kind of pull from there. This is pretty much stock to what we've seen from like Rakdos for a while. Kind of the innovation that we're seeing, if you want to call it that, is a single copy of Archfiend of Dross. We're seeing full 4 of Shelley's, 1 Liliana, 1 Chandra, Hope's Beacon. I really like this card in these kind of grindy decks. The +1 gives so much card advantage. Doubling Invoke just is like, 1 Invoke's bad enough. When all your Invokes start doubling, it just hurts so much more. 3 Bankbusters mains. You got some Fable the Mirror Breakers with the good art. Braid, Cut Down, Go for the Throat mix of removal spells. And then you'll see like just kind of your hate pieces, your Barrages, your Glistening Deluge for the Go Wide decks, Graveyard Hate, Hand Hate, Greedy Mana Base, Soul Transfer for Planeswalkers or creatures in terms of exile removal that can also rebuy for some value, and then a copy of Breach the Multiverse. This is usually in the kind of grindy mirrors or as well like the greed piles, so you can steal your opponent's Atraxa or Atali, stuff like that. Interesting to see only a single copy of Brotherhood's End, leveraging the Deluge as the kind of sweeper of choice for matchups such as like Mono White, Wedding Announcement decks, and you don't really see green decks going around, but pretty stock in terms of the Rakdos list. From there, we go to Grixis Midrange, which, surprise, surprise, has a lot of the same cards. This version of the deck, we still have the Corpse Praiser over the Graveyard Trespasser, which you see in the Rakdos version. This version is playing Hidetsugu and Kari. This is kind of the flex spot card. Sometimes you'll see some copies. It wouldn't be surprised if some of the Grixis lists are just on full for Shieldred. I mean, from a budget perspective, having to buy these in paper, paying like $1 for this card versus like 70 for this. But this is just being used in a fair way. There is the combo version that's trying to set up the Singularity. But this is basically just draw some cards, set it up. If it dies, you get some value. If not, it's just a 5/4 flyer that kind of forces your opponent's hand. Very similar kind of idea. The Chandras, the Invoke Despairs, a Soul Transfer main in this version. Access to blue also gives you Disdainful Stroke and Make Disappear, so helps in the kind of the greedier matchups. Full 4 of Disdainful Strokes are available in this deck, along with some copies of Negate. Similarly, you have the Breach in the sideboard, and then just this version's playing Invasion of Karthus as kind of the sweeper effect. So not Brotherhood's End, instead this. Be interesting to see, because this does come down a turn later than you would normally see from like a sweeper effect for 3 mana. I'd be curious to see how this kind of plays out relative to Brotherhood's End in terms of just curving out considerations. From there, we go to Esper Legends. So Esper Legends' big kind of inclusion is the Rona Herald of Invasion. So this lets you kind of draw, discard, and then untap itself whenever you cast a legendary spell. Pretty much all the creatures in this deck are legendary. So it provides you some utility in that respect. Its flip side is just a really efficient beater that also then gets to steal cards from your opponent's hand and then cast them for free. So that's pretty much slotted in as a 4 of in these decks. Single Urtai, 4 Denix, 1 AO, 4 Shieldred of note in this version, 3 Adelaides, and then it's a pretty stock list. Lauren's in the side, another AO for the grindier matchups that's not exile-based removal. Interesting kind of seeing the Archangel Elspeth make one of its only appearances I've seen thus far in Standard. A couple in the sideboard for the grindier matchups. Seems to have utility against the heavy removal decks, heavy sweeper decks, stuff of that nature there. Similar with Wedding Announcement for like the red-black based matchups. We then go to our first of the domain deck. So there's kind of 2 versions of the deck. There's the domain control, and then there's the domain ramp. I would say the variance is the sweepers. So this version here is going to have Drag to the bottom. We see a couple copies of Archangel, the Contagious Vorak. Your payoff is obviously Atraxa in this list, or Herd Migration to also get some value. This version's playing some Cruelty of Gix that can also be used as a reanimation effect. Tutorable for some kind of random one-ofs, Farewells, stuff like that. Unleash the Inferno. Leyline Binding often is a 1-mana removal spell in this deck as well. Your sideboard's just a number of different removal spells, kind of interaction spells, and then a Kaya for the grindier matchups kind of coming in. So we contrast that with the 5-color ramp deck, where we have access to, this one's more creature-based, more rampy-based, as opposed to full control. So you're playing Invasion of Zendikar, one of the battles, that pulls out 2 lands, and then when it flips over, pretty easy at just 3 mana. You can also have like a pretty nice curve where you go Topiary Stomper, that gets you your 4th land, you play this. You get to 6 lands, if you play another land for turn the following, or like that same turn, you can attack it and flip it over, so a nice little sequence there. But this version's topping out, you got your Talis here to free cast stuff, your Traxas, Archangel of Wraths, Ossification, Leyline Binding, as kind of some value plays. You're playing a bunch of lands like basics. Sunfall as a sweeper that also leaves behind potentially a very large body. And then some Myrexes. Myrex is ambitious in a deck that's trying to play so many colors, but you do have a lot of basics and some fixing in there as well. Kind of cool to see Tyrannix Rex, I guess, for the heavy counter-based matchups. Or so like if you think like against this deck, folks are going to bring in a lot of Disdainful Strokes, they'll bring in a lot of targeted removal. This plays pretty nice against both those avenues. Reckoner, Bankbuster in the side for the grindier matchups, and then just like sweepers, graveyard hates, stuff like that. We then move to Jeskai Control. So this is kind of trying to take, I guess, the more controlling route. Sanctuary Warden's your kind of main creature win con, along with the Wandering Emperor. Technically have Sunfall as well. That can make a creature that can attack in. Similarly with Bankbuster and Fable the Mirror Breaker. Fires of Victory as a scalable removal spell based on the number of cards in hand. Some counters. Disruption Protocol can be counterspell, just with incidental treasure tokens, with the Bankbuster, stuff like that. Deluge, Flame Blast, Bolt in there. Is there any sort of utility lens? Sokuzen. Sometimes you'll see Merrics in these decks, just to be able to make creature tokens that attack in. Your sideboard, you got another Sanctuary Warden, Chrome Host Seed Shark, Allbreaker Horror, Blue Sun's Twilight Steel stuff. Again, just incidental creatures. Against this deck, your opponent's likely bringing out a lot of their removal, so then you can bring in some creatures. But like the Blue Sun's good to steal, like Shieldrids or kind of Atraxa, stuff of that nature. And then lastly, I love mono red. I don't think it's going to do that well in a field of so many Shieldrids, but kind of interesting what we're seeing in this version here. We see Kenra's Spell Spear, 2 mana, 2/2 Trample Prowess. That when it flips, it gets Ward 2 and Prowess as well. We get Nikiri's Warcrafting, so some main board answers that to Shieldred that also can provide some pseudo card advantage. Notably, no, I forget his name. The 2 mana can't block, and it's still damage. You draw cards. Not in here. We have Bloodfeather Phoenix in here as well, and then we have Sword of Once in Future being played as a 3-of in this deck. Protection from blue and black. When it deals combat damage to a player, you surveil 2. Then you can cast an instant or sorcery with mana value 2 or less without paying its mana cost, exile it. So you can rebuy your Play with Fires, your Lightning Strikes, or your Strangles in this deck here. Obliterating Bolt on the side. I should also mention just 2 Myrics in the mana base to be able to create creature tokens, as just in terms of the heavier removal-based matchups. Obliterating Bolts, Pithing Needles, I guess for like Bankbusters, Fable the Mirror Breakers, if any sort of Planeswalker style effects, any sort of like reoccurring activated abilities. Barrage for blue and white stuff, and the Festivity for Go Wide, and then Furnace Punisher for the Grixis style matchups. Sometimes you'll see like Koth Fable the Mirror Breaker kind of package, but this one's leaning a little bit more aggressive. So that's kind of a high level, kind of showcasing some of the decks themselves. If you are interested in, like I said, in any of the other one-offs, I will link the page that you can find all the deck lists, so you can just search to your heart's content. They are sorted by alphabetical, so you might just have to click into each of these. That's what I was doing. You can see, like, just Control F, try to find where things are. But let me know what deck you're most excited for, what deck you want to see win. And like I said, do you think Fable's time is done in Standard? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.